I worked for a massive American retailer for many, many years. Honestly, it was my first serious job out of high school, and as time went on, I secured enough bonuses and pay raises that it became a lucrative job for quite a while. Not only did it keep my bills paid, but I had some savings, I could afford vacations, all that kind of basic stuff. Overall, it wasn't a terrible job. I've read a lot of horror stories on Reddit about things that happen to people while they're at their jobs. I just can't conceive most of it happening at Walmart, of all places. Besides that, I've never witnessed problems with working off the clock or was even asked to work off the clock. I felt generally paid appropriately for my job. All that being said, it doesn't mean I didn't hate the shit out of it sometimes. And it also doesn't mean that nothing bad ever happened. I had scores of shitty managers, worked in stores that were run very badly. I feel like we all do. This is a problem that comes from the top down. Having said all of that, the worst thing to ever happen to me was this. I recently inherited the toy department. This was around 10 years ago. It had gone without a manager for like 6 months, and the one they had before that was utterly incompetent and just really lazy. So the department itself was just a complete mess. The toy department took up 15% of square footage of the store, so for it to not have a manager, it was kind of like having the whole corner of the store be the Wild West. Kids would come in and absolutely annihilate the displays. Older kids would come in and do pranks, throw stuff all over, even damage some of the merchandise. It was a seriously challenging position to take on for myself, but at the end of the day, I figured that if anybody could, I could handle it. You see, I'm a toy department professional, literally. I can take any toy department and make it look like somewhere that you want to shop. Clean it up, stock it right. I worked my ass off to fix it, and the back room too. So it was daunting, but I had a lot of confidence in myself. And I knew I'd pretty much be doing it alone, because Walmart doesn't really give a fuck about toys. But I figured if everybody just left me alone and let me work my department, it would all be fine. Again, it's just plastic and cardboard. It's not like I'm dealing with expiration dates or things that can spoil. It really isn't rocket science. So here's to what actually happened. I decided the first thing that I want to do is physically clean the place up. There's overstock everywhere. The bike rack and Power Wheels rack was just a dumping ground for any kinds of crap that you can imagine. Small cars were piled up, bikes in a jumble, huge bouncy balls thrown into the mix. The more I cleaned up, the more I would find. Though I soon was bagging up trash, candy wrappers, and all other kinds of nonsense. It's like there was a homeless person living in that department somewhere. Anyway, it takes me days, but I finally get the Power Wheels rack cleaned up. I can actually start moving the Power Wheels boxes around, back to where they're supposed to be. As I grab one, it sounds all rattly. I thought maybe some other toy had fallen in or a bag of screws inside the box had busted. But then as I move the box, I see that there's a wet streak where I'm moving it. Then there's a hole in the corner. These things generally run from like $75 to $300. And this is not what I expect to see on some kind of expensive item like it is. Oh no, it has to be mice, right? Well, no sooner did I have that thought that 2 mice come bursting out of the hole, go sliding across the tile floor right in front of me. I scream, jump back, and recompose myself. This is a personal nightmare for me because I know the facts that are involved. There's 1 mouse, there are hundreds somewhere else. I saw 2, so I know in my heart there's probably 200 lurking in the toy department, the department that I was handed over on a silver platter. I could literally feel my body get coated with sweat as I realized that I bit off way more than I could chew. Perhaps I really didn't want to deal with this. I push the box some more and it sounds like a fucking rain stick. It's all like psh, 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 like there's sand inside. I'm like, what the hell is going on in this box? But I'm not curious enough to open it yet. I know whatever's inside is bad, and the more I'm around it, the more I can start to smell it too. Holy hell, how has this been sitting here for this long? A few weeks, maybe months? The reality of the situation dawns on me. I realize I could get sick from just touching the outside of that box. There's a lot of factors at play, and none of them are beneficial to me. Then I think, well, fuck it. I have to get this off the sales floor. We obviously can't sell it in this kind of condition. And I don't really want to break this open right on the sales floor because I don't really want any customers seeing whatever's inside. It's just bad business, and like I said before, I consider myself a professional, and I can handle some damn mice. So I get a cart, try to load up the box. The bottom of the box basically just gives way, and mouse poop cascades out. Bits of paper, liquid, the most wretched shit that I've ever seen. Every time I moved the box, it was just shit everywhere. Mounds of it, piles of it, rivers of mouse shit running right out the bottom. You ever see Jurassic Park? Remember when they found that dying Triceratops next to that absolute unit of shit next to it? It's like that, except pure black and dribbling this weird mucus. It was definitely enough to turn my stomach just at the sight. The smell was 100 times worse. It's both a home and a cesspool for mice, active decay in real time. At this point, I'm about to hurl, and I get that stupid box onto the cart finally, go grab my personal protective equipment, and clean the shit out of the shelf, the floor, the air, my hands, everything that was exposed. Usually, I'm not the sort of person to even get gloves for most of my jobs, but I wish I could have gotten a fucking biohazard suit for all that. It was absolutely disgusting. There was zero chance of getting anybody else to help me too, so I just knuckled down and told myself I'll do whatever I gotta do. I take the stupid box to the back. It's like 5 feet high, 3 feet wide, and 2 feet long. Just imagine how much potential there is for all the shit in this box. It's everywhere, pouring out of the bottom, flowing into the hole in the corner, and the liquid, whatever it is, oozing down the cart and leaving a trail from the wheels. Once I get to the back, I go to the area where we take all of our damaged goods. Tell the woman that's there that I'm gonna throw this thing out. Explain to her what was going on with it. Mark it down, but don't touch it. This is a legitimate biohazard and should not be inside our building. I explain everything to her pretty calmly, pretty clearly. I'm doing everything by the book. But just how wrong I turned out to be. She throws a fit. She says that we need to talk to the manager. So we wait. Once he finally comes and eventually decides what we need to do is open the box and wash the merchandise. I say absolutely not, no way. This is for children. It's filthy, I'm not touching it. It's not safe or sanitary. Nobody should have to clean this thing. We go back and forth for a while until finally I pull out the facts for him. Mouse poop is a toxin. It affects children the most. There's a reason they say to check nurseries and baby rooms for mouse poop or evidence of any kind of rodent. They carry all kinds of bacteria and diseases that kids simply just don't have an immune system for yet. I then explained that if we wanted to be the first Walmart experiencing that kind of lawsuit, go ahead, put the toy back out on the floor. I really put my foot down and inadvertently embarrassed the hell out of my manager. He finally agrees, says to leave it and we'll get rid of it ASAP. And then he has this very dismissive demeanor about it. I don't even think anything of it though. I had a problem and now it seems this problem has been handled. I call that a true blue victory. I filled out the proper form with the cranky old woman from before, washed my hands and returned back to duty. I think to myself, thank fuck, and I just go back to work. The next day, that filthy box is back on the sales floor. I full on raged out. I threw it back onto the cart and took it back again. Mouse shit was still falling out of it. It was crazy to have to do it all over again, take those same exact steps. I felt personally insulted. I knew those two schemed together and put it back out there to make it my problem. It's unbelievable, unprofessional, and honestly I was ready to square up with the first person who looked my way. The claims woman says the manager said we couldn't mark it down and we definitely couldn't throw it away, so we just try to sell it as is. It was like something out of a dream, a nightmare, the dumbest nonsense I'd ever heard. I made a point to let her know that too. That just the simple act of trying to reason was the equivalent of mental weightlifting for her poor brain. I didn't hold anything back. I kicked that shit-filled box and let some more of those mouse turds rattle right out, at which point I look down and say, see, that's exactly what your brain does. We get into an actual screaming match. Seriously, why can't she see that a toy filled with rat shit is not safe for anybody? She's crying and I'm fuming. The store manager comes by and says that he told a maintenance guy to clean the box up, and he's sorry it looks like he didn't do a very good job. I take one look down at that box again before glaring right at the manager. Clean the box? There is no cleaning this box. It's a living, breathing pile of excrement. I shake my head and go off, laying into both of them about how they're going to get a child sick or killed, just purely out of being cheap and lazy. I don't care how good of a job he did. That thing needs to be gone. Like, if it's in my department, I'm leaving. I will never come back. It's sick. Walmart is disgusting. I can't even believe I'm having this argument with them right now. He said that's my choice, but he'd have the item cleaned up properly by this afternoon. I point a finger in his face and told him he better clean it himself. That way, he might have a change of heart when he sees how truly disgusting the situation was. So I slice open the end of the box and stuck my hand in and yanked the whole fucking thing out. I nearly fell over. Not only was it filled with shit, it was a huge nest. There were corpses all over the fucking thing, all over the floor. Dead mouse babies stuck to the cardboard inside the flap. The store manager looks disgusted. He gets on his walkie and calls the bike assembler. The guy arrives and says he'll clean it up and sell it as a display. The bike builder looks like he's about to faint. I said I'm done, bye-bye, and I left. I didn't know what else to do. I honestly thought about calling corporate, OSHA, the news, the health department even. What I actually did was went home and cried. The next day I ended up going to work whatever the fuck time I felt like it. I clock in, go to my department, and there's the power wheel. Who knows how long it took that poor assembler worker to work on that, but it did look like 1,000,000% better, but I didn't care. I dragged that motherfucker straight to the compactor, but it wouldn't fit. So I had to rip the wheels and mirrors off to cram it in. I was back there raging at the compactor for like 40 minutes. I took the battery out and then took it to automotive to recycle. Then decided, they fire me, fuck it. Everybody in the store saw me practically the last 3 days, fighting about this stupid toy with management. Everybody saw me literally throw that piece of merchandise in the garbage. Nobody ever said a word about it again, except the store manager who came by and said, "Where'd you end up putting that display at?" I said, "In the garbage." And boy, he fumed. He just turned around and walked away. In the end, I did turn that toy department around. Got our pest control guys in thanks to the assistant manager who made the call for me, since I guess debt managers can't do that. Rocked the shit out of that department for several years. I won a few awards for sales and improvement, and nobody questioned my shit again. Luckily, I never had a problem remotely like that again though. The store manager was demoted and shuffled around the store soon after. The creepy part happened after everything went down. One day I came into my shift, I went to my locker to drop off my belongings, and right away I got this weird vibe. There's nobody else in the entire area, which is unusual for our back facility. It's almost always crawling with employees. I open my locker and what do I find inside? A dead baby mouse, placed perfectly atop my vest, badge, and lanyard. Every day for weeks, maybe even a month or two, I would find these dead mice in my belongings. It started in my locker, then eventually progressed to the areas that I worked in, before finally, I started finding them in my pockets, taped to my vest. All kinds of disgusting, creepy shit. You better believe I was bringing this up to corporate, to my management. But unless they caught the person, there was really nothing they could do. I kept my head down and didn't make a stink about it. Never showed a reaction. I'm sure that pissed off the culprit even more. I knew it had to be that former manager, maybe even the claims and damages lady. Either way, I kept an eye over my shoulder for the rest of the time I worked there. Thankfully, it eventually stopped. I moved on with my life. But being harassed with dead rodents was one of the creepiest things ever. Some of them weren't even dead, and that told me whoever was doing this was getting down on their hands and knees, locating baby mice all by themselves. Somehow they knew where to find them, and that grossed me out even more. I was a cashier for 2 years, and it was pretty much exactly what you expect. Slow, dull, tedious, very mindless work, encountering all manner of different people at different times of the day, at different points in their own lives. When you work retail, you really see it all. Blow-ups, breakdowns, psychos, weirdos, you name it, they're walking the aisles. It's honestly just part of the gig though. Dealing with people comes with any customer service job out there. And that's exactly what retail is. Honestly, I actually enjoyed it for the most part. I know, weird, right? But the worst experience I had at Walmart was the night that I referred to as the comedy of errors. It's a long story, so forgive me. I'm writing this on my phone. It happened about a year or so into my experience behind the register. I call it the comedy of errors because ultimately, it should have been a harmless interaction. Instead, I got caught in the crossfire of a misinterpretation, and that further spiraled down this rabbit hole of stalking and eventually assault. Firstly, I was the only lane open, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's been a busy day, the store's packed to the gills, and for whatever stupid reason, there's only one bottleneck to siphon these people out, and that bottleneck is through the funnel that is me. If you were shopping in the store that day, I touched your items. I sent you on your way out the door. It's just one of those days where only one register was available. Now, there is a lot of people that say that in their own stories, but usually it's not true. Why? The company uses data from last year to assign shifts from the current year. So, for example, if a snowstorm came in on January 2nd, 2014, and we were bombarded, the computer would assign a bunch of cashiers to work on January 2nd, 2015. This system leads to days where there are very few cashiers and days where there's many. On this day, it was a slow day of the year, so there were fewer than usual. Also, there were more people that had already called out. I was alone, and I kept the entire store on my shoulders that day. It was kind of a perfect storm, now that I'm explaining the context. We were severely understaffed, but the call-outs really made it a problem for that specific day. So, I enact time-saving measures to help us get ahead. Firstly, I would, in between orders, give people in line their own dividers so they could start putting their groceries on the belt while I was helping the person in line before them. Constant flow. This made sure there was always somebody in the bullpen, so to speak, and then get ready while I raced through the current cart of items. It made my job faster paced, but that's what we really needed in the moment. Well, this woman, who for the story's sake I'll just call Ellen, comes in my line with her son. He was transitioning from female to male. I had no way to know this, besides the way they presented themselves, but as you can imagine, I was too busy to engage. I failed to notice that there was a potentially trans person in line. This is neither here nor there. It's just merely the first error of the series of errors. I'm actually pretty open to that kind of thing, so I use male pronouns for him and will do so here. As I give the customer in front Ellen her divider, I overtoss it. It bounces off the items on the belt and lightly hits the woman in line. Ellen then claims I assaulted the customer, out loud for everybody to hear. Goes on to make a bit of a scene out of it. I asked the woman I threw it to and she denied Ellen's claim. Exactly what I said is I did not hit her, I did not. I apologized regardless, and the woman's husband made a joke about knocking me out. He was clearly joking. This really helped to clear the air, at least for me, because I was stressed and everybody was annoyed in my line. I went on with the joke and they enjoyed it and went about their way. Throughout this time, I'm paging for my manager to help me with the line. It reached dairy by this point, the back of the store. There were probably, no joke, 75 people stretched all the way back, all just staring at me, waiting for me to hurry the hell up. Just that amount of eyes on me alone had me nervous to the point of sweating. It was like working and performing at the same time, with these short patience of customers, and you better not forget a line. It's Ellen's turn now. Everything goes all right until I ask her about a shirt without a tag. Now, by the book, this isn't really that hard. Just ask the customer the price in the department and fill out a little slip. But you needed another slip to show the accountants where the shirt was manually added, as a source document. It's literally just a bunch of boring protocols to account for the item after it leaves the store. Now, I asked Ellen what department the shirt was from, She refuses to answer me. I took the shirt off the hanger and unbuttoned the top. Men's shirts have buttons on the right, and female shirt buttons are on the left, due to this historical thing that I'm not going to get into here. I determined the shirt was in the female department, explained what I did for the bitch Ellen, and then moved on with her order. It was all very weird because of my breakneck work pace. Didn't have time to analyze anything. Didn't have time to size up the crazy. Her son, the one who was transitioning, was buying liquor. He looked under 40. Walmart's policy is to card every freaking person in the damn party. So I carded the guy and Ellen. Both were pissed. Both of their energy changes immediately. Their body language. I could just tell that I just fucked up with them. Again, I'm just following protocols. I'm trying to be fast. This Ellen woman wants to fight, have words over every little thing. It's blowing my mind and I just couldn't handle it. Ellen was now more pissed when her check wasn't going through. Little known fact, paying with a check at Walmart can be a bitch when the scanner ain't working. Well, it wasn't. Sometimes even, the bank issuer asks for verification of the person's identity, which adds 5 minutes to the transaction. To put it plainly, it's the slowest way in history to pay for something, and it's even slower when you're at Walmart. Hell, dragging in a goat and trying to barter it in exchange for items would have been faster than what she was doing. To top it all off, she's complaining at the top of her lungs all while it's going down. Ellen is pissed, her and her son leave. I see them complain to my store manager, literally pointing right at me as they do. Ellen was much more up in arms. Her son wasn't quite as fired up, but still, they both did some talking. I went back to work, assumed it would blow over because, just as I explained, I didn't do anything wrong. The next part is a bit confusing. The store manager pulls me aside, accuses me of committing sexual harassment and assaulting the customer. The manager was a complete jerk and abused me just to show off his power. He sends me back with a lovely threat, and I quote, "If you receive another complaint tonight, you're fired. And I'll make you unhireable, to the point of cleaning shit on the sidewalk will be a dream job. Now get back to work." Of course, the line is still out to dairy. I'm traumatized with fear. I work another hour or so, my hands shaking as I ring every single item up. All eyes still on me. Now management and potentially corporate will be keeping tabs on me. Ellen and her son could be causing God knows what kind of damage to my life, even outside of work. Going on paper, blasting me around town, who knows? I really had no idea what to expect, so I finished my day and clock out. Once I got home, I poured myself a drink, all the while wondering, how did I commit sexual harassment to Ellen? I understood the assault, she just denied the woman from before, claimed the divider that I threw hit her instead. Then it occurred to me, well, remember that shirt? Because I had to put it in a department to sell, I somehow offended Ellen on behalf of her son. Apparently the shirt was for him and not Ellen as I surmised. But by having the button on the left, I misgendered that person even though the shirt was undeniably from the women's department. I immediately Facebooked my new work associates, Ellen and her son, reached out to them. This was way back before that kind of thing would get you in a shitload of trouble. They agreed that my actions were okay and not sexual harassment. Hell, Ellen's son told me how professional I was, which I thank my college for. Apparently I only offended the mother. Well, somehow something got confused in the conversation, and then they both turn on me, snapping and talking all kinds of shit, making threats. I honestly have no idea what was going on, so I just stopped replying. This was my second error of the night. I should have never reached out to them, as it gave my identity and ultimately my location. I logged out of social media for the night and went back to contemplating the weirdness of that whole situation. I didn't have to work the next day, but I did have to go and vent about the whole thing. The main manager was there, and he got an earful, but he was an asshole. He didn't really care. So I just avoided him the rest of the time that I was there. Then went and bitched the assistant managers and department directors. All of them totally understood where I was coming from. Couldn't believe how out of proportion everything was blowing up to. I ended up leaving the store not long after, ran a few errands, and then went to get lunch. I just picked something up and then buzzed home, sat in my car while I was eating it. I like to be alone when I'm thinking, so I spent some time sitting behind the wheel and just thinking before I went back into my house to get back with the chores or relaxing or whatever else I was going to do that day. Before I finished my food though, I noticed movement on my driver's side window. Who did I turn to see? Ellen from the grocery line. I couldn't believe it, but after a few seconds of reasoning, it all kind of made sense. She probably got my address from the store or somebody I worked with. Maybe came to apologize. I dusted the crumbs from my hands and opened up the door to see what she wanted. Big mistake. What I should have done was actually lock my door and call the police like my gut had told me to. I got out to greet her and say hello, got zero response. For whatever reason, I continued to walk forward, going as so far to extend my hand for a shake like we're old classmates or something. Again, no reaction to any of what I'm doing. It isn't until we take like 3 steps apart that I realize she's got her hands behind her back. It's like walking into a snake pit. Froze up, got tense, just waited for whatever crazy shit was about to go down. One of my final errors was returning to the store that day, then greeting Ellen in my driveway. It turned out she'd been staking out the store. When I rolled in the next day, she spotted my car and waited for me. She followed me around town all morning until I got to lunch, then followed me directly back home, where she watched me eat my food like a total psychopath. At some point, I guess she got fed up with waiting and decided to just approach me with a hatchet. She brought it out from behind her back at a full swing, clubbed me upside the head. Fortunately for me, she failed to turn the blade out, so it was a dull side that whacked me, but still, seeing stars as I ran from my porch and dove into my house. She screamed all kinds of obscenities, threats, insults, even threw a rock at my door. Then after all that, she just left. Obviously, I called the police. I had a whole paper trail from work and from Facebook of my interactions. Now, I had blood running down my head from the assault. They came by, got my statement before rolling over to her house, at which point shit really hit the fan. She apparently had a history of stalking and harassment, so they didn't even hesitate to pick her up. From there, I don't really know what happened. Never saw Ellen again, but management made it sound like she was going away for a long time. They ended up dropping all that stuff with me at work, but I moved on quickly from that job not much after this event. Running a register isn't worth all that kind of danger. My very first job was at a Hot Topic in a dying mall. 16 years old. I feel like this was a milestone for my generation. Almost an iconic gig back then, working at one of the many alternative stores found within these shopping centers. It was always fun, great music, and those discount perks were dope as hell. I'd usually get something almost every day. That being said, the hours were kind of long. Customers usually pretty weird. One of the worst parts, at least to me, about that job was folding t-shirts. It seemed like every person who touched a t-shirt would just ball it up, throw it somewhere out of place completely. I folded thousands and thousands of t-shirts. So tedious that I would have nightmares about being buried in them. Other times, I'd wake myself doing the motion of folding, and the jolt would just shock me. Whatever, right? Just part of the job. Shit, I was a kid. Not like I knew what work really was yet. I started there when they first began the rewards program. My manager was always on my ass, trying to get me to sell memberships. Nobody wanted a damn membership, or maybe I was just the shitty salesman. Either way, I rarely signed anybody up. This was reflected on the weekly report that was sent to the district manager. I even got written up over it all. This in turn would create a bit of a stressful atmosphere. I found myself having second thoughts about it all. The corporate aspect can kill the vibe at any job, and having somebody breathing down my neck about something people didn't want to buy Shit, it was almost depressing. It convinced me I was bad at what I was doing. I started working there because I loved the music. Their album rack was always down my alley. They're a musically oriented company, so they had this sound system integrated with central server that played a selection of maybe 25 songs to be updated every month. It'd be bangers from every genre, usually alt and metal stuff. Though back then we had like Hollywood Undead and Broken Side lighting up the rap scenes. It's a dope ass time to be working in a mall. Well, the playlist didn't update for close to 3 months. Every day I would hear those same songs 5 or 6 times over for months. It drove me insane. To this day, I still get burned out on music faster than anybody I know. I think it had something to do with that 3-month stint. It's almost like being in prison. I actually hated coming to work. The downfall of what I considered to be a cool gig. During my breaks, I would hang out in the rundown, barely open mall, grab a bite to eat from Auntie Anne's. Their pizza pretzel was my shit, and the cute cashier would hook me up with the free marinara. We would flirt and chat all the time. This was another great part of the mall culture that I don't think kids today know about. The mall was like the day club for teenagers. Nothing but smoke shows walking from one end to the other. Half the employees stacked and fine as hell. The melting pot for different people, different age groups, but everybody socializing, just vibing together. Super fun time, 10 a.m. till 7 p.m. every single day. Eventually I got her number. Once I texted her, it was on my black and silver flip Motorola. We planned to hang out. Fortunately, we didn't have a single day off together, which was like this weird pandemic in the early 2000s. It was like everybody worked all day. It's a weird memory I have. Even my parents wouldn't get home until like 8 p.m. most nights. I had my older friend buy me a Four Loko when they still had caffeine. I drove to her place around 10 p.m. to pick her up. We shared the drink in the car on the way back to my house. We barely talked, unlike at the mall. Very awkward and very quiet. Didn't really have any game now that it was just me and her. She was super cute. I was used to flirting with her in her uniform. For some reason, I was just out of my element. And I think she knew right away. She turtled up a bit. Even when I started talking, she'd either laugh or nod, which made it even worse. I settled into the seat and focused on my alcohol. My head's starting to swim a bit. The overlap with the caffeine made me anxious too. Really wasn't a good crossfade. I take her to my sparsely furnished and unfurnished basement, and immediately we went at it. To put it plainly without driving too far into it, it was not good. I know I was young and not a perfect partner, but she didn't really give me anything to work with. She pretty much took her clothes off and just flopped around. She wasn't upset or anything, she just acted very, very strange. Cleaned up, got dressed, and fooled around a little more, and finally called it quits. When we were done, we just sat there awkwardly. I took her home just after midnight. Again, a very long, quiet car ride. I get to her house and she crawls into my lap, starts making out with me like we're in love. Being a kid and this being originally what I wanted, I gave in. We made out in her driveway for a long time. Long enough that the porch light came on. One of her parents came out to wave her inside, and we said our goodbyes and she hopped out and bolted in. For whatever reason, I vowed to never speak to her again on that drive back home. Chalk it up to toxic teenage thinking, but the whole thing just weirded me out. We were so good and flirty at the mall. I didn't get why she was so weird in person. Maybe I was weird too. And if that were the case, it's just even more of a reason to cut it off. We probably weren't a good fit. I could live with that. I didn't go to Auntie Anne's for a week or two, just hoped it would be the end of it all. That's the only spot we ever really saw each other, so I figured if I avoided it and went somewhere else for lunch, we would no longer interact. Well, that second week, I could see her prowling around outside the door, peering in through the front windows. She's got the hat and uniform on and everything. I squatted behind the register and rushed to the back, where our little office was, shut the door behind me. My manager was all tripped up and asked me what the hell I was doing. I gave him the rundown, albeit a censored version. He starts just to laugh and laugh. All right, All right, I'll go out there. You stay back here until she's gone, he explained to me. Nothing worse than a scorned lover, am I right? Really? Shit. Thanks, man. No problem. I've been on both sides of this thing and it's never fun, he explained. Least I can do is help you out. With that, he went out and took over the floor. We didn't have any customers at the time, so me abandoning the register wasn't a big deal. I could see the entrance on camera in part of the register area. Sure enough, she came in and starts talking to my manager. They exchanged some words and I found myself sitting on the edge of my seat, gripping the armrest. I felt like she saw me, like I was gonna get busted. But after a few minutes of going back and forth, she turned around and wandered out of the store. My manager was a good dude, especially in that moment. He waited a full 10 minutes to make sure that she was gone. She even came back sneaking by. If I just come out, she totally would have seen me. I seriously owed him after that. The next few weeks was the most intense game of cat and mouse that I've ever played in my entire life. The consequences were real, and I did not want to deal with them. I felt bad for what I was doing, but shit, she made me feel bad on our date, and I didn't want to feel like that again. I know, young, dumb, immature shit. Shallow, but again, we were like 16 or 17. I knew this wasn't going to be the end of the world for either of us, so yeah. It went on like this for a while. I avoided her entire wing of the mall, came in through the furthest entrance I could. My manager and coworker always gave me the heads up when to hide. At first, she came by daily. After a while, it reduced to 1 week, but man, when she came, it was for a long time. Just prowling around outside, pretending to be on the phone, staring with this vacant expression through our glass. Sometimes she would stand out there for an hour, cut herself short to check if she could see if I would come by. Honestly, I was starting to feel bad, but there's another part of me where it kind of scared me. And then one day she just stopped coming by. I don't remember exactly when, but it was at least 6 weeks into this whole ordeal. She didn't come by anymore. No calls, no texts. All was clear on the Western Front. Finally felt like I could breathe again. And after a bit, I started venturing the mall. I'd slip into the food court to grab some grub, shop at GameStop, all my usual antics. I chanced it and walked by Annie Ann's a couple of times. Neither time was my stalker there. Really starting to regain my confidence and come back to being myself again. Well, I guess you could say I started slipping. One night, I ended up working way later than expected. I ended up leaving the mall sometime around 8 or 9 p.m. It wasn't a big deal, just had one of the security let me out. But once I was beyond that door, I was on my own. My car was one of the only ones left in the parking lot. I'd parked right up next to the door that day. Up until this point, I've been kind of parking at random, just trying to hide my whip, because obviously this girl knew what I drove. But when I got out there, I see my car's been messed with. A couple of my tires are flat and my windshield is vaporized. Just a field of broken glass on my dashboard. I stood there dumbfounded, wondering what the hell just happened. I approached the car, investigating the rest of the damage. I pulled out my phone to call my parents and find out what the hell I should do. I stepped off the curb, got a few steps in when it all happened. "Hey, bitch," somebody said from behind me. I turned and saw a guy there, a little older, much bigger than me. "What?" I asked him. I stopped walking and just stared at him for a second. As I did, another one came from the side, smacked my phone out of my hand. At that moment, everything screamed for me to run, but I just continued to stand there, thinking surely these guys have me confused with somebody. They start talking all kinds of shit to me. I tried to get away and back inside of security, but it couldn't happen. They snatched me up and started to put the beat down me right there in front of my car. I covered up as they wailed on my back and shoulders, telling me I shouldn't hurt girls, and stuff like this doesn't happen to nice guys. It all clicked. My stalker, these guys were with her somehow. One guy punched me directly in the head with both fists. The other guy kicked me in the ribs. His knuckles caught my ear a couple of times and exploded, started to swell right away. Bar none, one of the worst pains I've ever experienced. When they relented for a single second, I made a mad dash for the mall entrance, and this time I made it. They weren't quick enough and a couple of security dudes waved to me. I waved back and started banging on the door, screaming for help. Thankfully, those guys never came up behind me again. The security opened the door and got me inside, then went out to investigate the parking lot. Nada. Whoever had kicked my ass was now long gone. They further smashed up my car too. I made a police report, but without any suspects, there was little to go on or do. They told me they'd follow up, but I didn't hold my breath. I got my car towed to a shop. Mom and Dad were pissed, but generally, life went on. I told everybody what happened at work. My manager took it pretty seriously. He actually went over to the Auntie Anne's, requested to sit down with the manager and the girl. He came back an hour later, told me she'd been fired and wouldn't be allowed on the premises, effective immediately. They even had her picture up in the employee-only wings of the building. I never saw her again, but she called me off and on for another year and a half. I never answered. She never left a voicemail. It was weird, but I get it, I guess. Young love, and I was being a total dickhead. I never figured out who those guys were that she sent to beat me up. Her brothers maybe her new boyfriend and one of his buddies. Didn't really know a whole lot about her, so I guess it really could have been anybody. Thank God they weren't really super skilled at whipping ass, because I got away with just some bruised ribs and a bloody nose. I left the mall job for a different gig by the end of high school. By then, my car was fixed and I had a different phone number. Wild, wild times back in the early 2000s. Thanks for listening.